On this episode of Geek Mythos Podcast. What if Superman were to be black and was a hero in the 1960s? What do you think would happen? On this episode, we're going to talk about the Blue Marvel. And if you've never heard of him, I hope you guys stick around. All right, so it's just gonna be me, Jose. All right, by myself on this episode. So here's the thing about this story that I'm gonna tell you about. It's kind of like a retcon, but it isn't. It's an original idea, but it's based off of a hero that we obviously know, Superman. But his story is way more different than Superman. Well, his origin story. His story was published in 2009, and I love this story till this day. Obviously, like that's why I wouldn't be telling you, right? The story is about Blue Marvel, and if you have Amazon Prime, I recommend you guys getting it on. I recommend you guys getting it. Oh my god, I recommend you guys getting Cosmicology because it's free, and you could read the first 5 issues for free. Starts out in New York City on a fight. We see the Wasp, Wonder Man, Black Widow, Yellow Jacket, Iron Man carrying Mrs. Marvel. Yeah, Mrs. Marvel. Ares, Sentry, and She-Hulk are fighting this strong villain, and he's just decimating them. One after another. Iron Man is asking who he is, but he just responds, I want one man. Blue Marvel. We later know that he goes by the name of Anti-Man, also known as Connor Sims. But we're going to jump back to the story. In 1962, Blue Marvel and Anti-Man are fighting, and the destruction's all over the city. The conversation leads to them knowing each other, but Blue Marvel wins the fight, with his mask almost torn apart, revealing his face. We jump to August 1962, the Pentagon Room. They are discussing the Blue Marvel and mentioning the color of his skin and who he is. Adam Bernard Brashear. He was part of the Korean War, graduated magna cum laude, which I had to Google how to pronounce because I didn't want to sound, dumb. In 1954, and an all-American fullback. He's been to outer space, stopping the meteors the size of Arkansas, lifted a whole enterprise from water and flew it home, stopped a hydrogen bomb with his bare hands. And what stops them from loving him is the color of his skin. And they believe that the color of his skin represents the United States in 1962. And at that time, the president is John F. Kennedy. And they tell him about what he should do with the Blue Marvel. The president contemplates on the Blue Marvel, civil rights movement, segregation, the retaliation of the people. They have a conversation that leads to Blue Marvel hanging up the cape, and he gets a presidential Medal of Freedom with no press. And I quote Brashear, how can it be right to tell a man he can't be who he is? We jump to the present day after the attack on the city, and Tony Stark, Mr. Fantastic, and Yellow Jacket are discussing Anti-Man and the Blue Marvel. I have to point out on this Earth, Tony Stark is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. He scans for files under Blue Marvel, and he goes to Dugan and wants an explanation. Now, Dugan is part of the Howling Commandos and is an officer of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he was once a member of Nick Fury's team. He says the 40s had Captain America and the 50s had Marvel Boy, but the early 60s belonged to the Blue Marvel. Dugan tells Stark to go meet Kreutz, a member of the Joint Chief during Camelot. He mentions a Mr. Task being part of the Joint Chiefs meeting, talking about the mutants and how they are all over the world. How can they be so strong and powerful that can help countries start a new war? This one particular meeting created a project, Project Wide Awake, to quote Stark, a whisper in the dark by men afraid of what they didn't understand. A policy of fear and repression. We moved to Kreutz mentioning a last mission that was also used as a cover-up for Blue Marvel's death and occurred in space with an alien. See, Blue Marvel was trying to be peaceful, but then the alien attacked them, so he went at it, defeated the alien, and never made contact with government officials. Tony Stark reveals a file from Kreutz, protocol files that were never completed. We end up following Tony Stark to Silver Spring, Maryland, and I believe he meets, and if I could remember her name correctly, is Candice Brashear. Ah, yes, but she was an agent of 31. She was an agent, 314, Marilyn Fraser. Tony tells us. They have a discussion, and Candice calls Brashear. Brashear comes home after finishing up a class of physics, I believe, and she tells him everything from Tony Stark to her being a spy, and he contemplates it, leaves, and goes to the moon to contemplate for a while. This is one of my favorite parts of the comic and his origin. Yeah, basically comic. Is that he is best friends with the Watcher, Uatu. Now, for those who do not know, the Watcher is a person that observes, well, alien race to us, observes life on a planet, records it, but can never interfere when whether the planet is dying from famine or war. We travel back in time and we see their first interaction, but they are distracted by a ship entering the moon's orbit and headed towards Earth. It's the same alien race that he just fought off against, and he quickly diminishes them, and we see the remains on the moon. We travel back into the present time, and they're talking about how his wife was a spy, the racism and segregation that's going on blatantly, and it basically hasn't changed, but just barely changed. He leaves and meets up with Tony Stark, and at the same time, Ant-Man appears in the Sahara Desert. Mr. Fantastic, Yellow Jacket, Brashear, and Iron Man are talking about the origins of Blue Marvel and Ant-Man. Brashear was given the project to lead the scientific attempt to harness antimatter through the creation of the negative zone, of the negative reactor, which created a break between the negative zone, and the positive matter universe. It exploded when the initial test to run his negative reactor was initiated, but it exploded and only Connor and Adam survived. Only moments after, Connor was disintegrated by the antimatter and Adam had become the Blue Marvel. They have a discussion about what happens in the 60s right after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, and the United States was on brink of another civil war, a race war. But Brashear leaves right after he has an argument with Tony Stark. Reed Richards explains to Yellow Jacket and Iron Man and points out the differences between one's privilege and one's oppression. Brashear was looked at by the government right after he hung up his cape. He was like a prisoner, and sure, he had freedom, but the government placed a spy on him in order to check up on him. He states, and I quote Reed Richards, The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, were lauded as heroes, protectors of mankind, if you will. They gave us parades in our honor, approached us for endorsements. But yet, the X-Men, heroes as well, are hated and feared. And have you ever asked yourself why? The conversation is so important because it leads to the bigger picture. Why follow the idiocy of the hatred bandwagon, and why not question it? Why can you not read the truth behind of what's going on? Why must there be a difference between the X-Men that were born with powers and others heroes were accidentally given those powers? Why must it be because of their DNA, and because of their DNA they are feared and not praised like other heroes? Why are there laws, and why can they be prosecuted? Why can the X-Men be prosecuted and not Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic, and Yellow Jacket? We follow Bashir to his underwater lair, and I gotta notice. I gotta point out that he has a dinosaur and the connection between Batman. Come on, Batman has a Batcave in his. Batman has a dinosaur in his Batcave, and we also see Namor. Apparently, he's best friends with Namor too. So they talk about the injustices and the justice of one country and what they hold. Adam will do anything for his people, and so would Namor. And that's the different perspectives of what they see when they talk about the government. But then we cut to Adam flying by the moon and is attacked by Ant-Man. They talk about how the world has never changed, how it changes to a different thing, from race to religion, and how there's still oppression in the world. We cut to Adam talking to the Avengers, and the idea to stop the Ant-Man can cause a explosion in the city, and Mr. Fantastic is against it. And Tony agrees with him, and Blue Marvel just doesn't has enough and just wants to do it himself. He attempts to leave and goes after the Ant-Man, but the Avengers try to stop him and fight him. And I gotta point out, this is so important because this is where you see the Sentry, which is such an alike of Superman. And for those who do not know, he's kind of like the other Superman. One of his powers is actually a power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. He went up against the Worldbreaker Hulk, which is of itself one of the strongest beings, and that's gonna be another episode for another day. Blue Marvel punched the Sentry so hard he went off orbit and destroyed his space station. That's how powerful this guy is, bro. Blue Marvel gets so tired he has to be put up on a stasis cube or stasis chamber to recover, while Ant-Man starts his debacle in New York City. Blue Marvel regains consciousness and talks to his wife that Sue Richards has brought in from the Baxter building. He admits that he could have been an inspiration to his people instead of the backlash and the retaliation that he was so cowardly thinking. He goes to where the action is and has a plan to create a cyclotron, a human cyclotron, a hero cyclotron, a particle accelerator with the heroes. Don't tell me. I can't. I'm not gonna explain that better than that. Just go read the comic. It looks better on the comic. But why in God's name would his wife come to the epicenter? Why? Well, of course, because the writers want to make us cry. To have a second origin, of course, like I said in the beginning. This is where his second origin comes from. His wife dies. She comes in contact to the blast radius and is 100%ly burned. But she does say her last few words. He wins. He forgives Connor and spends his few months with his kids and himself remembering his wife. Till he opens a box with his new suit and a letter from his wife. And that's his origin. He appears in many comics such as Civil War II, The Ultimates, Ultimates 2, Age of Heroes, Mighty Avengers 2013 series, and the Secret Empire series. I really want to see him in animated shows or the movies that they do, animated movies. I don't think we're gonna see him in a live action movie. I don't think that. Sadly, I don't think his character is that popular, or many people don't know him. He's kind of like that forgotten hero that writers put into the comics last second, just to create an original character. Even though he's based off of Superman, but that doesn't really matter because his character actually holds. I mean, Kevin Javot, the writer that created him, created, the Blue Marvel miniseries, and he proved that the character could hold his own. The character with that much power and insight has the potential to create these stories for many generations. The Blue Marvel has gone toe to toe with the Hulk, Sentry, and is one of the smartest minds in the Marvel universe. So, especially in that Earth, I think it's Earth 616, which is the Ultimate Universe, because we see him in the Ultimate series, and he's considered to be an alpha level threat by Tony Stark and Sam Wilson. So that tells you that. Well, that's it for this episode. Well, mini episode. I don't know what else to tell you other than to read his comic and tell me what you guys think. Tell your friends, family members, geeks, nerds, comic book readers that you know, all that good stuff. And tell them to come and listen to the Geek Mythos podcast. I have an episode coming up. Hopefully this over the weekend. If not, most likely on Tuesday. By Tuesday, you should have a new episode, guys. And I'm gonna say my farewell. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Hey geeks, if you want to hear more from us, check us out on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Subscribe, like, or follow on any of the social networks mentioned, or on Spotify, iTunes, and Stitcher. We love to do what we do and hope you enjoy what we do. Just remember, Geek Mythos Podcast.